All right, hello everyone, welcome back to the stream. Sorry for the little bit longer delay this morning. Hello Craig, welcome back, always good to see you. All right, so before I get into it, let me do my usual stuff. So Gunforged is available for purchase. It's my roguelite fantasy shooter, my first release as a full-time indie game developer. And yeah, it's a great way to support me. It's $8.99 currently. I'm sure it will go on sale at some point in the future, but you can also get it at a discount if you purchase it as part of a bundle. And yeah, if you do play it, leave a review. I very much appreciate that. Unfortunately, I got a negative review, so sad, but that's okay. Those things happen. But anyway, and then also I have my 2D Survivor style course, which will teach you how to build a complete game in the Godot engine. That's another great way to support me, as well as a great way to kickstart your Godot learning journey. And I also have a new course in the works right now. It's an online multiplayer course. It'll be like a networked cooperative multiplayer. So if you're interested in that, just stay tuned to this channel and my X account or whatever. So you'll be notified when that goes live. So all the links for this stuff is in the description below. I'd very much appreciate if you took a look at those. And you can also support by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, watching my other videos, all that good stuff. So anyway, let's get into what we're doing today. Hello, Sebastian. Your 2D platformer course got me out of my developer burnout 2 years ago. Awesome. Great to hear that. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so I didn't get a chance to work on the game much over the weekend. My off-stream development efforts on this game have slowed down because I'm producing the course that's in progress, which is a lot of work because I've shared this before, but maybe I'll just give you a little bit of an inside look on how a course production looks. So obviously, I have to record each lesson, which involves me sitting down and actually writing out the code, but then I have to bring that into video editing software and edit that. You know, cut out all of the mistakes that I make, cut out the excessively long pauses to keep the pacing good, all that kind of stuff. And of course, splicing in any corrections or additional information that I missed when covering the lesson. And so basically I record, 15, 20, 30-minute lessons, and then I have to watch each minute of that back to record it and render it. And these courses end up being anywhere between like 60 and 100 lessons. So I got to do that over many dozens of times. So it is quite a lot of work. Producing one video takes probably 2 hours of work, 1.5 to 2 hours, or one lesson video. So it's quite an undertaking, but that's what's eating up all my time off stream. So anyway, a little bit of an inside look at how that works. Hello, Codex. Hello, K-Clouds. Welcome back. Good to see you. So let me take a look. Let me get reoriented here real quick. I was actually recorded some lessons this morning. Already been productive morning, but let's get into this. So we've got the chest. And this combat victory container currently doesn't do anything right. So we've got the visuals in place, and the run manager should create that combat victory. Selected combat reward. Okay. So yeah, it's not passing in that selected combat reward object anywhere. I don't think. Yeah, state combat reward here. Enter state combat reward. So it's creating that combat reward event state machine. Okay. So it looks like I've got the relevant stuff stubbed out. I'm passing in that selected combat reward in there. And then this is calling set combat reward on that combat victory container, and that's doing nothing. So the combat rewards are going to be, let me think. When this opens up, Let me just stub this out visually speaking how I want to do this. So if I add a board container and I add a board there, we'll make this shrink center. So what's going to happen probably is this is a big chest. I think I drew this chest too big. I might have to shrink it down. I wonder if I should do that. Might have to shrink that down at some point. Hello, Forgotten. Welcome back. Always good to see you. Lots of repeat viewers here. So, yeah, so the rewards are always going to include a card that you can loot and possibly include an artifact that you can choose. And it's also going to have a blood reward, which is the currency. And it's also going to, what was the other thing? I think that's it, right? I think it can just, I mean, I can look at the combat reward object here. Currency, artifact, guaranteed event type. Oh, right, this is going to guarantee an event type. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot going on here. Okay. So basically what I want to do, I think, is... So this board is where I will put the card reward that gets generated. We're going to need some kind of UI element for selecting an artifact, which is probably just going to be, let's see, artifact container. I wonder if I should just use an artifact container for this. Maybe not. If I just copy this and paste this in here, and just duplicate this a couple of times, shrink center. I think this is going to look rather awkward, but let's just see, let's just do it and we'll see what happens. Artifact container. So we need to populate this board. So we're going to hide these things by default. So we've got our board container and artifact container. Let's just get a reference to those things and just hide those immediately. So node private board container, node private artifact container. Oops. Actually, this is wrong. This needs to be an HBox container. All right, on ready, artifact container dot visible is equal to false. And then, what was the other thing? Board container dot visible is equal to false. So set combat reward. I think I'll just store that private combat reward. Why does it want to say combat reward 1? I don't understand. This dot combat reward equal to combat reward. Okay, so we've got this play open here. Maybe what I'll do is I will... Actually, maybe I should just generate the rewards in here. Let me think. Private generate rewards. Private void. I forgot how to type or write code, I suppose. Hello, Neozoid. Always good to see you lurking. Always good to have our lurkers. We love our lurkers, don't we, folks? So generate rewards. What we need to look at, so we need to generate a card. So card tag, guaranteed card tag. So this is where I'm going to need to do this. This dot get card, get loot. I don't remember how this works. Oh, you know what? Shoot. I probably shouldn't be generating rewards in here, actually. Now that I think about it. I probably need to generate the rewards in the state machine. Right. So I'm not going to actually store, I'm going to undo this. So I'm not going to store the combat reward object itself on the UI element. What I'm going to do is I'm going to generate the rewards inside of the state machine here. And then I'll just notify the UI script about what rewards it needs to show. I think that's probably going to be better because in this context object, I have the card loot table manager here. So I can do pick cards with tags, and then I can take that selected combat reward dot guaranteed card tag, and then oh, I got the arguments mixed up. One and then that guaranteed card tag. Okay, so var card reward is equal to that. Let's do artifact resource array artifact rewards is equal to if the selected combat reward dot has artifact, then we're going to generate context dot artifact. Do I not have an artifact loot table manager? Artifact. Oh, do I not have an artifact loot table yet? I don't think so. Artifact registry. Yeah, I don't have an artifact loot table, I don't think. Where is that card loot table manager at? Let's see. We have artifact manager. Right. Okay, so I should probably create an artifact loot table manager then. So let's do that really quick. Scenes, manager, kerblam. And let's go to the run manager here. We need to instantiate that artifact loot table manager into there. And then we need a script on that. And I'm just going to, let's see. I'm just going to copy from the card loot table manager here. I need to redo my loot table, I think. I need to redo my loot table, but that's all right. Artifact loot table. Artifact ID in artifact registry dot all IDs, artifact resource, artifact registry dot from ID. Oh, this needs to be an artifact resource. Cool. Okay, I think that's fine, and then I can delete this method. I don't need that. Okay, so now that we've got the loot table, I want to pass that into this context here. Public artifact loot table manager, like so. And then the run manager, create context. Where is that context? Create event state machine context. Artifact loot table manager. Node private artifact loot table manager. All right, so I think all that's set up now. Anyway, all of that was done so that I can do this. Pick artifacts true. Otherwise, we're just going to do an empty array. So if we have an artifact in our selected reward, we're going to generate 3 artifacts to choose from. And that's going to be a problem, actually, because there's not 3 artifacts currently. That's interesting. Let's change this to a list of artifact resource. Let's not be fancy with it. Result equals new list. Artifact resource. And then prevent duplicates. Yeah. If artifact is not equal to null, or I guess we'll do equals null, we'll just break out of it. Otherwise, we'll do results.add artifact. Okay. Cool. What else is in here that I need to do? Oops. What else is in here? Combat reward. Oh, currency. Yeah, I need to do the currency. I will do that later. Let's add a to-do note here. To-do, handle currency. And anywho, enter state init. Let's do generate rewards. I don't know what to do with these values yet. I need to pass those into the UI in some way. Okay, anyway. Lurkers rise up. Yes, indeed, Jackie Daytona. Welcome back. Robert Carlson, good day to you as well. Good morning, Emerson. Been trying out Godot with C# and your Godot utilities have been very handy. Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah, I think if I were to say something about my Godot utilities, I think that the node, the way that you can fetch nodes is just so nice. It just speeds things up so much. Good morning, AnyKey. I'm a bit lost in ownership of certain things. In my game, a player can throw dice, which are packed scenes on the player. Available dice. They are thrown by calling a die tray scene roll dice, which instantiates them, rolls them, and emits a signal with a result which can be acted upon. But I'm confused about who owns the dice. Should they be instantiated on the player and then rolled? Should they be forwarded as packed scenes as they are now? Should I just tell the die tray what die resource I want to roll and let the tray handle it? Probably sounds confusing, but what I'm seeking is general guidelines of ownership, I guess. Okay, so I don't know the context of your game, but what I would say is that, yeah, generally speaking, I don't think the player should own the dice. Unless, I mean, it depends. Like, I don't know how tightly coupled the dice are to your player. But generally speaking, I think it's useful to think of, like, how can I make the player such that it's standalone? Like, if I ran a scene with nothing but the player in it, does my game function? And I guess the answer should be yes in that case. Now, in terms of the how to do this, yeah, I think what I would do is I would separate. See, I don't know what else your player does, because if your player only rolls dice, then I think it's perfectly fine to have the dice owned by the player. But if your player does other things, then what I would do is have the player send a request in whatever way you're comfortable with that, yes, these specific dice want to be thrown. And then I would let the dice tray handle that, the instantiation. It would handle the request, basically. I don't really see, again, I don't know what's all going on in your project, but I would say probably there's no reason for the player to be responsible for instantiating those scenes. Even in games like Gunforged, like in my game, the player is not responsible for instantiating the guns or the bullets. So, like, there's that degree of separation between the player and the weapons and how they behave. So I think it's good. I think it's good to create that separation if you can, if it makes sense. So that's my initial thoughts. But anyway, hope that helps a little bit. Good morrow to you, Billy Helms. Should I call you Firebelly? Yeah, you can. You can call me Firebelly. That's fine. So people will call me Fire for shorthand if you want. Actually, what's funny is that when I was in college, I used to play a lot of League of Legends. And the guys that I played League of Legends with would just call me Firebelly, like on campus. It's kind of funny. Anyway, those days are behind me. I retired from League of Legends. So let's see. The player can target an enemy, pick which dice to roll. The dice are then rolled and... Oh, sorry, I need to take this call really quick. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. The player can target an enemy, pick which dice to roll. The dice are then rolled in each phase, then becomes an ability the player can execute. Yeah, I think... yeah, there's a number of ways to do this. I mean, ultimately... whatever you're comfortable with should be the thing, but it seems to me like the way I would think about something like that is that the player should just be sending requests out about what it wants to do. So in terms of which options are presented to the player, that should come from outside of the player. When the player clicks on something or selects which dice they want to roll, that request gets forwarded to whichever entity owns the dice, or you might just even send that request to the dice tray so that it can be rolled. You could even elevate this to like a dice manager that is like a third-party node that just kind of manages, here's what dice are available, here's what dice the player has chosen, and then take those things and like send them to different parts of the system through signals or any other method. But I do think that, yeah, probably creating that separation between the player and the dice rolling is a good idea. That's kind of just like my hunch. How did you handle the player getting a gun and instantiating a bullet and gun forged? So the player had to... So there's an assembled gun object, and in Gunforged, each gun is composed of 3 parts: the receiver, the barrel, and the magazine. And so there were 2 assembled gun objects that were on the player, and whenever a part wanted to be added to a gun or removed from a gun, that was handled through a signaling system at the assembled gun level. So basically, all the player was responsible for was aiming whatever assembled gun is currently active, and then the inputs for like firing would be handled at that assembled gun level. And then what the assembled gun would do is it would look at, okay, what is my current part configuration? And then that would determine which bullet actually gets instantiated by the assembled gun, if that makes sense. So the assembled gun object was like separate from the player. It was inside of the player, it was like in the player tree, but the instantiation of the bullets and stuff was not coming from the player, it was coming from the assembled gun. So if that makes sense. I've had some issues because I've been sending the pack scenes around to different components, but now that it's gone bananas, I'll do some refactoring. Thanks again. Yeah, I think that's probably, yeah, if you find yourself sending pack scenes through signals and whatnot, I think that that's generally, yeah, not a very helpful way to do things. I kind of like to view packed scenes as like, I mean, it kind of depends. Obviously, you know, it's all situational, but I kind of think of packed scenes as like almost like constant resources that if you find the need to like tell something, I want you to instantiate this pack scene, and you're passing the reference to the pack scene, that kind of like indicates to me that there's something flawed about a system. You'll notice in my code, I'm like almost never passing packed scenes anywhere ever. And again, because I like to think of them as like static resources, like everything in the game should know where a packed scene is, such that it doesn't need to instantiate it, right? And there's various ways of doing that. You can use like, I like to use resource preloaders in a lot of places. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. So like a resource preloader, I don't really know what the exact purpose of a resource preloader is, but I basically just use it as a collection of scenes that I want to instantiate at some point. So if, for example, in here, I know that I want to instantiate a board, so I just add that. And the reason that this is useful is because if this board path ever changes, it will be updated in this resource preloader. And then I can just instantiate this by name, basically. It's kind of an awkward way of using resource preloaders. I'm actually not sure that I would recommend that, but that's one way that I do things. The other way to do it is with instance placeholders. So for instance, in my artifact container, I've added this artifact display scene here, but what's done in the editor here is I've actually marked this as a placeholder. And so what that does is that essentially it creates an instance placeholder at this point in the scene tree. And on that instance placeholder object, you can call create instance, which will create an instance of the scene that it's acting as a placeholder for, and then add it to the tree right at that level. So basically, I kind of like already know at the scene level all of the scenes that could potentially be instantiated. And if I ever want to trigger an instantiation of that scene, that typically happens in response to some kind of signal or as part of the setup of the scene, etc. So actually, this is a perfect example in here. In this combat victory container here, I'm actually doing the same thing with this instance placeholder, this Lotus placeholder. And what I'm going to do is from my event state machine, or from my combat reward state machine here, I'm going to take this artifact rewards, which is a list of artifact resource. I'm going to pass that into the combat victory container. And then since those is a list of resources, it's going to instantiate one of these scenes for each of those resources, if that makes sense. So yeah, hopefully that little tidbit is helpful to both of you, or to everyone that was interested. But yeah, speaking of passing those along, I need to get... So I need to get these rewards that I'm generating from here into the scene. I don't know. I'm just going to use a tuple. Get at me. Actually, I'm going to just make this a single one. Don't remember how to do this. Oops, this is a card reward. I think that's right. Yeah. Cool. Hello, Christopher. Welcome back. Always good to see you. My hair is not good today. Interesting. Spent like 2 days working on systems. There's some visual and game mechanics, but mostly we ended up setting up so much structure. Except for your Wild Jam. Do you know what kind of game you're making? I mean, obviously you do know what kind of game you're making, but do you want to share what you're making? I'm very interested to hear it. So yeah, in this combat victory container, I want to pass in those rewards. So basically what I'm going to do is public void set artifact rewards. I have an interesting idea for the game that I'm kind of curious to share with you all. But it is going to make the game a lot more complicated. it is going to make the game a lot more complicated. Anyway, so card, resize board and place cards, board, card stats. Cool. So that's going to work for the set card reward, set artifacts reward. For each var artifact and artifact rewards, we need to get a reference. Oh, this is game.gameplay.board. And then artifact display placeholder. Node private instance placeholder artifact display placeholder. Artifact display placeholder dot instance dot create instance as artifact display display dot set artifact. Okay. So in here, I think I want to do board dot card transferred. Why isn't that working? Board inventory component dot card transferred plus equals on card transferred. I don't remember how this works. Card stats to inventory. Okay. Private void on card transferred. Board inventory component to inventory. This needs to do disable card drop on. I think that's fine. I don't know what I want to do here. To do something. Okay. So we need to be able to select artifact rewards, which I don't currently have a way of doing. So maybe I'll just do signal public delegate void clicked event handler GUI input plus equals on GUI input void on GUI input input event EVT. If EVT.isAction pressed game constants dot action click left emit signal clicked accept event. Let's do accept. Well, it doesn't matter, I guess. Accept event first, I suppose. Okay, so then we want to do display.clicked plus equals on artifact clicked artifact on artifact clicked artifact resource. All right. Why does that not work? Why doesn't that work? Did I do something wrong? Did I do something wrong? Cannot implicitly convert type void. Huh? Okay, I'm missing something obvious. Oh, yeah, right. Oops, forgot to wrap it in a lambda. Oops, oops, oops. Yes, the reason this was happening is because this is an invocation of this function. So it's basically saying subscribe to void, or it doesn't make any sense. So I just had a brain fart there. Got to wrap it in a lambda, so it's actually a function. All right, anyway. Theme is expedition. The game idea we came up with was Ship of Theseus Simulator 2025. Oh, interesting. It's a roguelike and a juggling problems game. Interesting how you like a Ship of Theseus roguelike is actually super interesting. Like you have some kind of vehicle that you're just constantly swapping parts in and out of, and each part has like different stats associated with it. It's kind of like a different take. I mean, I know this is probably not exactly how you're going. A juggling problems game. Maybe it is how you're going, but yeah, I could see it being like it's almost like a grid inventory management game, but just with tighter constraints, right? So it's kind of like the same thing as like Backpack Heroes or Backpack Battles or whatever it's called, but where you've just got a more defined shape with explicit parts. Hello, Carto. Welcome back. Good to see you again. The as is a safe cast, but will throw a null if you try to access that variable. This here. Yeah, I mean, if this resolves to null, then yeah, you're going to get a null reference error at this line. But yeah, this is guaranteed basically to be correct, so. Yeah, right. I just prefer, I mean, maybe in this case it would be better to do an explicit cast so that it fails on the cast. Yeah, maybe that would be better practice. I just always got in a habit of using as. I don't know why. Maybe it would be better to do an explicit cast. The inversion of control system I created saved our bacon a lot of times already. Oh, very interesting. Very nice. Is game constant a static class? I believe so. Yeah, public static class, and I just wrote my constants in here. Someday I want to expand the Godot utilities source generators that I made to like be able to read your project file and put all of your action names inside of a constants class. Godot should do that by default. Maybe, does Godot already do that by default, maybe? I wonder if it does. I don't know where that would be, but you're constantly repairing from random debris you encounter. That sounds very interesting. Yeah. That would be nice. Yeah, I agree. At work, I've seen too many errors with as because the dev never accounted for it being null. Yeah, so I can imagine that's like a real problem if you cast with as early and then you pass the result of that cast through several layers of method calls. I could see that being very hard to track down, to trace. So yeah, it probably would be better to try an explicit cast as early as possible in those situations. Okay, so on card transferred. So yeah, I think I've written enough code here where I think it's a good time to test it. And actually what I might do is, what do I want to do? The unfortunate thing is I haven't really set this up nicely for local testing, which is a little bit bad, but let me try it anyway. If this dot is current scene, generate test data, private void generate test data, set artifact rewards, artifact registry dot from ID, artifact ID dot booster option. And then what's this one? I think poison heal. And then we'll do set card reward. We'll just do new card stats. Let's do skeleton warrior, I suppose. Let's do a salamander. We'll put the salamander in there. So we'll generate some test data, and also what we'll do is we'll take this position plus equals vector2.right times 100. So now what I should be able to do is I should be able to run this here locally or just as a standalone scene, and I should get some test data in there. Okay, sweet. I didn't move the position over though. Null reference exception. Resize board.get tree. Or resize board and place card. Oh, this is completely useless. What? Oh, my board is null. Where is that? Gotta mark this as unique names. That gets selected properly. All right, let's try again. Oops, ran the wrong one. That is not correct. Oh, vector 2.1 is what I want. Okay, let's try this now. Okay, so this is our standalone scene. So when we open it, we need to, so we got this play open. Set artifact rewards. Private bool has artifacts. Has artifacts is equal to artifact rewards dot length or dot count greater than 0. So in here, if has artifacts, artifact container dot visible equals true. And then we'll do board container dot visible is equal to true. We're gonna add some animations to all this stuff, but let's just take a look at what's going on here first. Try to do something like your game constants class with an autoload containing a bunch of exported packed scene references so that I can grab them from anywhere and they're all in one place. Not sure how scalable that would be though. Any thoughts? Yeah, I mean, I don't really like the idea of storing a global list of packed scenes. Now that, to be fair, if you could somehow auto-generate the list of static scenes and then just like reference them with constant variables, that might be useful. I mean, it's certainly preferable to loading scenes from strings in your script. But what I do is I just try to keep the scenes that I need to instantiate as local to the scenes that instantiate them as possible. And the way that I do that is, I talked about this a little bit earlier in the stream, but I use a resource preloader, which kind of just acts as like a store of all of the packed scenes that I want to instantiate from this scene. So like the run manager here is going to instantiate a board sometimes. So it's got a resource preloader with board in there. And then I can just reach into the resource preloader and say, I want to instantiate the board. And then this path here, the benefit here is that this path will automatically update if I move the board somewhere else. But yeah, that's me personally. I just like to keep the scenes as local to the scenes that instantiate them as possible. Now, that said, you know, if you're instantiating the same scene from multiple different contexts, then what I do is I typically just pull that out into a manager. So one good example of this is like the floating damage numbers in Gunforged. I need to spawn floating damage numbers from all kinds of different contexts. And so what I did is I just created a single floating text manager that was static that I could just call from anywhere in the code. And then it handled the instantiation of those floating damage numbers for me. But I think it's a matter of personal preference. You do have to use a string, Carto, yeah, to reference from the resource preloader. Although I made it a little bit nicer because I wrote an extension method for the resource preloader. So basically what I do is here. So I wrote an extension method, instance scene or null, which this needs to be instantiate. This is still Godot 3 language, but instance scene or null, and then I pass in the type. And what happens is it uses the type name as the string name to look up. So my scenes are always named the same as the script. I think is that enforced by Godot? I think it might be. And so I just pass in the type so it becomes a symbol rather than a string, right? And then inside of here, you can see that this just looks up that generic type and supplies the name as the key for the preloader in here. And yeah, so that makes it so that I don't have to use strings. And I do the same for groups too. So this is an extension method .add to group. This just takes that type and uses the type name as the group. So when I call this .add to group, it uses the type name as the group name. And then when I want to say get nodes in group, like get first node in group here, I can just pass in the type name as the generic parameter. So that's the way that I'm going about avoiding using strings in the code, is I just rely on the type names and just use that as the string name, basically. I have all available scenes listed from the resources by path, and then I use that in my scene manager. Godot enforces that the class is the same as script name, not that the node name is the same as the class. Oh, right. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. But yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of good ways to do it. But yeah, I think avoiding using strings where possible is a good idea. But I just handle that a little bit differently, I guess. All right, let's run this. Bam. Nice. So obviously that shifts. So there's going to need to be quite a bit of stuff done here. Animation wise, I still need to fix this. Oh, there's so much to do. Are these tooltips not working? Oh, shoot. I need to get an artifact tooltip in here. Might have to pull out the artifact tooltip, but let's worry about some other stuff first. So I think generally speaking, that's looking pretty good. Obviously with animations and stuff, which we'll probably start on actually here right now. So open that, play some kind of like camera shake, make these things fly out. Just trying to think, because if the chest starts centered, but then it needs to be offset in accordance with however much space these things are taking up. Also, what's with the giant space here? I don't understand that. Oh, right. So there's a giant space here because this is actually shorter. This chest is actually shorter than the bounding box that I've set up here. So it creates a lot of extra space, which means then that this can probably actually have a separation of 0. And then I'll just need to create another VBox container here. And maybe just set this to 24. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, shoot. I need to do this as well. Okay. I think that looks all right. Apart from these weird lines going on here, but that's all right. Potion shader looks neat. Thank you. Yeah, I think the shader turned out really good. You tell it to list the scene files of the views folder in my resources. Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do the same thing. I use the file system for things like the board configuration and the cards. Like I mentioned this before, but I have a card registry that loads all these card resources for me. It uses the file names as the card ID, and then also has a reference to each of these cards. So whenever I want to instantiate the phylactery, I can just go ahead and instantiate that from an ID, and it automatically knows how to load it and everything. The notion of motion of the potion ocean. That's funny. It's quite the rhyming there. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick 2-minute break, get a refill on my drink and all that stuff. When I come back, we will try to figure out what to do about this animation here. I still don't know if I like the size of the chest. I may end up redrawing that at some point, but got to get the chest animation looking good, get it working, and then, yeah, there's a lot to do here. I do need to show the blood too. There's a lot of UI stuff I need to figure out here. But anyway, I'm going to do a quick 2-minute break like I said, and then when I come back, we'll try to do some animations. We'll see how it goes. So I'm going to commit that. So I'll be right back in 2 minutes. And in the meantime, please check out the links in the description below. Those are all the ways you can support me. I will see you in a second. Oh, hello everybody. Hello, Bar2. I bought your Survivors Udemy course, but even though everything is the same, I got a bug which stops me from progressing the course. Could you look at the Q&A when you have time? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, apologies. I'm a little bit slow on answering the Q&A lately because I have so many other things on my plate, but I will absolutely take a look after the stream and see if I can help you out. How's it going, fellow chatters? Yes, indeed. Am I fashionably late? Yes, fashionably so, but it's fine. It is fine. Welcome back, Adam. Always good to see you. It is Monday. I think everyone's a little bit slow on Mondays, you know. That's just how it be. That's just how it goes. What are we doing? Maybe I'll take a little detour. Maybe I would like to, since we got a good number of people here, I want to maybe explore a different topic related to this game. So right now, the system, so basically what happens is you go through 2 events and then you fight a combat encounter, and then you go through 2 events, you fight a combat encounter, and that's fine. I think that's good, but I was feeling inspired to do something different. So I'm going to pitch this idea to you all and see what you think. So I just went through 2 events. I got a bunch of upgrades and stuff, and now I can choose a combat event here. So it's very rigid, right? It's 2 events and then a combat, 2 events and then a combat, all the way until you get to the boss. Now here's what I was thinking about doing instead. And this is going to add a ton of work, but I think that it has the potential to be a lot more interesting. If I do a new file here, let me just sketch out something. So instead of doing that system of events, what I'm thinking is there is a world map instead. And the world map can be populated with all kinds of little neat drawings and whatnot. But you start in the center of the world map here, and then there are various paths. So I'm just gonna sketch this out. Actually, I'll use a thicker brush so you can see it easier. So there are various paths, and this path might be, you know, a treasure chest or whatever. That's a treasure chest, don't laugh. This path might be a combat encounter, right? This path might be an alchemy event. That's a alembic. But then there's more paths along the way, right? So there's a chest over here, and then there's, you know, some other kind of event there. And then over here is another combat encounter, so on and so forth. And so these paths can be interconnected as well, so they can be connected to each other. So it's almost like Slay the Spire, except Slay the Spire, it's like you can only go one direction, right? There's multiple different options you can choose at a single tier, but then once you pass that tier, you can't do anything else. This is much more like circular, where you could go here first. You could go here first, and then if you wanted to, you could march back this way and go over here, right? Or you could do this entire loop here, do all of these events, and then come back down this way, right? And the idea is that every time you travel, there would be like a timer that advances, right? So I'm actually borrowing this from a game called Raven's Watch. Raven's Watch is actually like an explicitly timed game where it's like you have 15 minutes to get as powerful as you can, and then you automatically get into the boss fight. So I'm thinking something similar, except instead of being real time, it's just you can only make 10 moves before you fight the boss, right? And so it's a matter of optimally planning your path with those 10 moves, and of course avoiding things as necessary. So you could, in theory, depending on how the map gets generated, you could avoid combat encounters entirely and just go hopping around 10 different places to pick up various upgrades and events and whatnot. So the reason I think this is better is because it adds more variability to the gameplay, where you could have a string of like more than 2 events that take place where you just gather power. And you could also fight 2 combat encounters back to back. So it adds a little bit of variety in that sense. But then there could be more rewarding things out on the fringes, right? So all the way at the edge of the world map, this could be like a special event or like an artifact up here. So you might have to move 4 times to get to that artifact, which is going to eat up a huge chunk of your timer before the boss appears or before you fight the boss, right? So anyway, that's the pitch. What does everyone think about that? Why have a 9-to-5 job when you can have a 24/7 job? Yeah, exactly. I haven't done any programming in a while now or anything productive really, but watching this is making me want to code. Get on it. Yeah, coding is fun. Coding is fun. But yeah, I'm glad to be an inspiration, Carto. Hey there. Hi all. Hello, Damien. Good to see you. I already like that idea. It's very PoE 2-like when exploring endgame maps. Okay, there's 1 vote in favor. Hope we're all doing well. I am doing well. Thank you, Damien. Have you seen Dicey Dungeons map? I like that map a lot. I have not. I'll have to look at that. Linear in a roguelike is always worse, so I like the new idea. Still get to pick the difficulties of the combat encounters. Yeah, I think what I would do is that the combat encounter, like you wouldn't be able to pick the difficulty when you happen upon a combat encounter, but the difficulty would be indicated like in a pre-generated way. So this one could be like a tier 1 difficulty here, and this could be like a tier 4 or something. So you would have a choice in the sense that you could choose which one to travel to, but you wouldn't like choose the combat encounter and then have 3 choices of what you want to fight, if that makes sense. Could also have surprise events as a player traverses the map. Yeah, so like, the Slay the Spire does like the question mark, right? So that could be a question mark there that you then, you can take a risk on. And that could be anything. That could be a combat encounter. That could be some kind of risk reward thing. That could just be a pure benefit, Each encounter unlocks more encounter options. Yeah, something like that. I like the idea of a fixed number of moves in the map. Yeah, so it'd be like, here's your map, here's all your options, but you can only move 10 times. And each move you make constitutes some kind of travel time until the bad guys like catch on to you and want to fight you, and that would be the boss encounter. Hidden pass unlock after X and Y criteria. Yeah, that could be something. Fog of War, and then a beacon in the Fog of War that simulates a rare encounter would be cool. Yeah. What about having a special event limited for, let's say, 3 rounds and will disappear? That is a good idea too. So what I like about this is you all are already like seeing a lot of potential in this and like coming up with all kinds of interesting ideas. I do think that this is going to make the game a lot more interesting in terms of the choices that are made. And I think that there's a good opportunity to draw like some really cool art and stuff too for like the different encounter types. And it should break up the monotony of this screen too, because you see all this stuff all the time. So imagine your health just, or I guess your health could stay, but like all of this in here then, well, that's a good question. How would I actually, I don't know how I would actually show the map, but you know what I mean. I guess that'd be a problem I have to figure out, but it could be shown in like this window here. And then, yeah, you could go to all different places. Random surprise events every X number of moves when you see the number ticking. Yeah. What about preventing players from crossing their own path? That is something I could do. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. Obviously, this is going to require some playtesting and everything, but I think I already have the events in place, so it's just a matter of like generating a map that's kind of like random enough every time. The board can also have an enemy that roams the board as well. Yeah, a lot of ways, for sure. Yeah. Not this map, but something more web-like. I got you, yeah. Only non-enemy locations on the map, but there's always enemies roaming the same map. Oh, interesting. So instead of being able to choose the enemy encounter, you kind of just like get thrown into encounters randomly. So it's almost like you're sneaking around trying to gather power, but then like you'll just encounter Like you'll get intercepted on the road or something. I once played a game on a friend's PSP, don't remember the title. So you had multiple choices to get to the place, but you could use the one way only once. Interesting. SMB3. SMB3, what is that? SMB3. Super Mario Brothers 3? I don't know. Gives you another reason to choose a particular encounter because of the encounter it might unlock. Yeah. Oh, are you talking about like Fog of War? Combine this with a type of day and nighttime mechanic, I think it could be very interesting. I have no clue how I would communicate with this limited color palette day and night, but that is an interesting idea. Might experiment with that. Maybe I should do that, because like this whole screen is going to go away then if I do that. So I almost wonder if I should just drop the work that I'm doing right now and instead like try to experiment with a map. Because what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to I added rewards to these combat encounters. I'm trying to make them more appealing choices. But I think that the map approach generally creates better choices too, so... And I really don't think the map is going to be that hard either. I think the hardest thing is just going to be coming up with an algorithm that generates a map that is like fun every time. And also the big question too is if I have predefined combat encounters on the map, there's a question of like what's going to incentivize the player to do those combat encounters. I think the obvious answer is, well, the combat encounter can like gatekeep a certain buff type that the player wants. And so you have to fight through the encounter to get to that. And of course, maybe the combat encounters just have rewards that are unique to combat encounters. Like maybe combat is the only way that you can actually get currency. So if you want currency, you have to fight things, you know? And that makes the blood currency a lot more thematic too, because then it's like you actually have to go out and like destroy enemies to collect their blood so that you can use that for various things. I do like that. I do like that idea. On the map in Super Mario Bros. 3, there were enemies that roamed the nodes, and you could run into them for an encounter. Oh, I see, I see. Okay, okay. Flashbang. Please do, it'd be fun to watch. Yeah, I kind of want to... Yeah, and then you just traverse 10 times and then you fight the boss. So it'd be like after the 10th time. So your 10th move, you can finish that encounter, and then it's like, oh, boss time. I'm adding way more work for myself, but I actually don't know. I don't think it's going to be that much work because, like I said, all the events and transitions between events and all that stuff is already in place. I'm just changing the way that events are chosen. I'm going to miss those eyeballs, though. I'm going to have to see if I can find a different use for those eyeballs. The context could be you're roaming a graveyard and going location to location to dig up a grave. That is another interesting point, is that I was going to have tiers anyway, so there's like 3 levels or whatever where you have to fight through as part of the run, and each level you encounter more difficult and thematically different enemies. So like the highest level might be like you're fighting clerics and like high churchmen and monarchs and like knights in armor, like on horseback or whatever. So like at first you're just fighting a bunch of peasants and like dogs and stuff, right? And then as you get further along, like you start like the people who are like higher status in society, you're fighting them. So like paladins and, you know, like I said, clerics, bishops or whatever. I think that'd be super cool. Not the context that is needed for everything in a game. Right. Will skeletons bleed? Well, you won't be fighting skeletons, so no. Sacrificial lamb is only available as a medium rare, hard, less rare encounter. Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. The eyeballs can be reused as a threat level. The higher the level, the more eyes of the church are on you. Ooh, Jackie Daytona coming in with the... So yeah, I could just get rid of the... what you call it? The combat encounters here, and then the eyeballs can just track like how much attention you've gotten. That is super cool, yeah. So I can basically just keep this, and this is just like the counter. So every time you move it, it opens an eyeball. And then things could maybe, yeah, as the threat level increases, maybe events could change, or like you said, those patrols can start appearing. Yes, that is an awesome idea. So yeah, we already have the threat level tracker then. The map theme with this color palette will go hard. Yeah, I'm gonna have a lot of work on my hands, but yeah, that's I'm feeling good about it. So now the question is like, how am I actually gonna generate this map? I'm gonna have to do some research on algorithms for generating these kinds of maps. I don't think I mean, this is obviously just like a, it's just a graph. I mean, this is just a graph, right? It's just graph theory where you've got nodes and edges connected to the nodes. That part's not a problem, right? I mean, you could just use graph theory to detect loops, and, you know, it's obviously going to be bi-directional graph. Unless I wanted to make it not bi-directional, I could dynamically change which nodes are traversable based on which nodes you visited, so you can't like backtrack at all. That'd be interesting. But then I'd have to ensure that there are loops, because if you went this way and it was a dead end, I mean, loops are probably a good idea anyway. I probably should design the map such that you can traverse the map without backtracking, because if you have to use one of your threat levels just to go to some place that you've already been, that's going to feel bad. So this probably is going to need to be more web-like and circular. I don't know if I'm going to explicitly prevent the player from backtracking along a place they've already been, but it should be the case that you should be able to do the map without backtracking, if that makes sense. So probably will need loops and more web-like features here, but that makes things a little bit more complicated too, because if I want to gate a very high reward thing like an artifact over here, but I also want to prevent backtracking, that means that the artifact needs to be connected to at least one other thing. But if I connected it directly here, then I could get there in a handful of steps rather than, you know, going through the appropriate level of difficulty. The other thing too is that other people have suggested is like, once I get here, a path could be generated, right? So like once you complete this, it could just generate a path back to a node that you haven't visited yet. So that way it prevents you from traveling there until you've beaten the event, but then you have a way out that doesn't cause you to backtrack, right? So that could be something too. But yeah, the hardest thing here is going to be just generating an appropriate level of difficulty in the map. So like I said, gating those high reward things behind a couple of more difficult encounters. Yeah. And then of course, positioning the nodes on the screen, right? Because the graph data structure is one thing, but then displaying that data in terms of a map that can fit on the screen is an entirely different thing. But what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm going to try to make the map just fit into this window here. So I'm going to try to make the entirety of the map fit in there, which is going to reduce my art workload and also have to prevent me from adding like scrolling or anything, which would be weird. So I think that'll be fine. Gives you the ticking clock element to the board so you can't stay forever, yeah. How are you approaching making art? Looks like you're doing it in parallel while prototyping. Yeah, I mean, I'm the kind of person that like, I have a hard time like being excited about the game unless I can see like real art and real animations in it. If this was all white boxed, I'd be like, this game is garbage. But because I can see like the nice health globe effects and like I can see the card art and the various animations and whatnot, It just gives me a much better idea of like what the final game would feel like, if that makes sense. Sounds like all the fun is going to happen tomorrow when I'm at work. Very possible, yeah, very possible. Samurai Warrior State of War. Okay, interesting. I will look that up for sure. Maybe some sort of penalty for backtracking could be interesting. You could have a dead end with really good loot value, but you'd have to backtrack 2 or 3 times, so there's risk. Yeah. Map also allows for cards with meta effects on the map. True. Yeah, I will check the map. Thank you, Rob. Very much appreciate that. I tend to work the same as you with not totally gray boxing. Yeah. I just have such a hard time with gray boxing. Like, I have a really hard time visualizing what the art and the effects. And like, I do think it's true that a lot of the fun of games just comes from like the game feel and how it looks, you know? The effects, you know? So, I mean, a very obvious example is like if you were building a first-person shooter in gray box mode and there was no weapon recoil and there were no sounds and there was no texture and like you just click and like the enemy's health goes down, right? That's very boring. But even with just like simple textures and like gunshot sounds and recoil and the enemy getting hit and like blood coming out, even if nothing else mechanically about the game changes, I think you can very easily imagine how that's immediately more fun, right? And so I do think a good portion of the fun of games comes from how they're presented like audio visually. It's not just the mechanics. Like the mechanics are what keeps you engaged with the game over the long period, right? But what makes the game like fun to play on a moment-to-moment basis is basically all in the visuals and the sound and the feel, right? So I have a hard time seeing the moment-to-moment fun of the gameplay, I guess, if I don't see those visuals. They say that if the gray box isn't fun, then it's not fun. Yeah, I know they say that. I don't know if I really agree with that. I mean, yeah, I don't think I really agree with that, honestly, because I think the first-person shooter example is a perfect counterexample. If Call of Duty was just gray box, would it feel the same? Would it be the same amount of fun? Would it be fun at all? I don't know. You can use hexagons for connections between battles. I think Against the Storm did a great job in a similar map style. Okay, yeah, hexagons, interesting. You have the mechanics but not the visuals to count as gray boxing, so recoil counts for that because it's feel. Right. Just finished the game jam with Godot. Awesome, how'd it go, Dragon Apple? No. Do you make your own music? I do not. No, I hire people to do music for me. Thasseus? That is one thing that I'm not yet competent at. Hello, Joshua. Welcome back. Presentation matters a lot. A headshot in Gears of War may as well be a pinata. Right. Yeah. Thank you, Carto. I appreciate that. Thank you. Call of Duty, yeah. Fun versus appeal. Fun keeps a player. Appeal gets them. Yeah, I think that's probably true. There's a lot of different opinions about this. I mean, the problem with like artistic medium is that it's very subjective in a lot of ways. So, have you tried making music for some of your games? Yeah, they're like, so the Ludum Dare has the compo section, or the compo. What is it called? Like, so there's the jam and there's the compo. The compo is 48 hours and it has different rules for the jam where everything in the compo needs to be created by you solo in 48 hours versus 72. So for the compo, you have to work alone, create everything by yourself and do it in 48 hours instead of 72. And so in those cases, yeah, I have to create the music myself and I just use something like Beatbox to do that, which is just a very simple way of creating some decent melodies, I suppose. Not a workable game, but still something. So simulation game's kind of a big scope, right? Yeah. What about your game's goal? Can you elaborate a little bit, Celso or Kelso, on what you mean by that question? Are you talking about what's the ultimate goal of this game? Hello, Snup Bill. Thank you so much for the IDR 10,000. I very much appreciate that as always. Thank you. And welcome back. We got the message Yummers here. We always look forward to that. I do like the idea of being a jack of all trades type thing for a game jam. How many percent your game to finish? If you're asking how far along my game is, I don't know. It's very early in development, so it's not going to be done for a while. And with this new map feature, I think that's going to push back my timeline even a little bit more. So we'll see. Game dev is very much an alchemy, art and science. Fortunately, a lot of sciences in the design and tools we use. Creative process is critical, especially for indies. I think that's right. I think that's right. So if I'm going to do the map stuff, then I don't think I should continue on with this rewards thing that I'm doing. I may still use the chest for something. Like, maybe not though. I mean, I might still use the chest for something. Maybe the chest can just be like the boss reward view instead. So that would actually be more fitting that you get a chest from a boss fight, and the chest can just be packed with good stuff. A little bit more, yeah. I'm trying to, like, that's the thing, you try to avoid scope creep, but then it's like, but what if this new feature or this new way of doing things is actually going to make the game much more fun, you know? People are always like, keep your scope in check, which I agree with, but at the same time, it's like you need to be able to make a judgment call about which scope creep. Like, what's the return on investment for the scope creep, right? If you're adding stuff and it's adding time to the game and it's not dramatically improving the game, then it's probably not worth it. But at early stages in development in particular, it's like, yeah, I'm still building the systems and figuring out all the things that work together, you know? So is it scope creep to add a map way of doing things? I don't think so, because I think the return on investment is going to be much higher compared to the level of effort, you know what I mean? Legend. Is that for me, Conrad? Thank you, if so. I think it's a reasonable request, otherwise it could possibly become a bit stale with the current loop. Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah, becoming stale is my biggest worry. And I think, I mean, roguelikes are all about player agency, and right now you don't really have agency in terms of, like, how the game loop goes. I mean, obviously you get to choose random events and stuff, but now the question is, do I keep the stained glass window stuff, or do I just hard code the event type on the map? Not hard code, but like, do I just pre-define, do I just pre-generate? So like alchemy, booster, max health increase. Do I just, instead of giving a player, so I could do one of two things. On the map, I could just have a generic event symbol, like that's a question mark or whatever, and then give the player these three choices that are randomly generated. Or I could just generate these each directly on the map. So I could have an alchemy event, and I could have a max health event, and I could have a booster event, right? My thinking, I guess, is that the player should know which event they're going to get, for the most part, when they go to a node on the map. But there can still be opportunities for like random events to happen, but it won't necessarily be this. It could be either a combat encounter, it could be just a bunch of money, it could be you know, any of these events here. It could be card rewards. Intentional creep is prototyping experimentation that's needed. It's the unintentional creep that ruins us, right? New era of game development emerges. Call of type game becoming popular. Call of Duty. The grave digging animation is chef's kiss. Thank you. Was that animated using the animation player? Yes, it was, yeah. All the animations I do are animated in engine or with shaders. I'm very scared of doing hand-drawn frame-by-frame animations. So I use a lot of particles, I use a lot of animation player, I use a lot of tweens. See the one for alchemy, animation player guru for sure. Thank you. Well, here's the alchemy, so here's the alchemy. Just put this in here, put this in here, click the alchemy pot, bloop. There we go. That did turn out good. Question I like to ask when adding something is, what problem does this solve? For example, you could say this solves a problem of player choice and encounters. Right. I conceptually love the animation player and would love to use it more, but God, is it horrible UX-wise? Yeah, I tend to agree. I think one of the biggest problems I have with the animation player is that I can't set defaults for it. So, like, I almost always use the snapping on, and I almost always have, like, an increment set of like 0.05 seconds, and I have to do that every time I set up a new animation. And then, like, yeah, the keyframes are kind of like wonky sometimes. I definitely understand that for sure. What is this? Fit to panel. Oh, there are some buttons in here that I've like never used in my entire life. But anyway, I think Godot just generally has a lot of UX problems. Like, I think these random panels just scattered across the bottom here are like really weird. But anyway, we're not going to bully Godot too hard on this stream. We're not going to bully Godot too hard. I need, I'm going to have a conversation with the AI. I hope there's nothing incriminating in here. I want to create, let's see, I'm making map of nodes. The map needs to be randomly generated with random connections between the nodes, while also minimizing backtracking player needs to do. I also need to be able to control the difficulty or reward of nodes based on their proximity or distance. Proximity to or distance. Proximity to, let's just say that. Based on their proximity to the players. Recommend me an algorithmic approach to accomplish these goals. Modified graph generation algorithm. Well, I already know that. Modified Prim's algorithm for graph generation. Initialize the graphs, start with a single node, the player's starting position. Maintain a list of frontier nodes, nodes that can be connected to the graph. Randomly select a node from the frontier, connect it to an existing node in the graph, preferably the closest one to minimize backtracking. Add new nodes to the frontier based on the desired branching factor. Control the difficulty reward. Assign difficulty reward to nodes based on their distance from the starting node. Use a function like blah blah blah. Randomize connections. Add a small percentage of additional random edges to create shortcuts and reduce backtracking. Stop when the desired number of nodes is added. Use a heuristic like Manhattan or Euclidean distance to calculate proximity. Scale rewards using a curve. Minimize backtracking. Ensure each node has at least one connection to a node closer to the starting position. Introduce randomness in the node placement and connections to make each map unique. I don't understand the point of frontier nodes. Can you more on how frontier nodes work? To manage the expansion of a graph controlled in an incremental way. Oh, I see. Frontier nodes are nodes that are on the edge of the current graph being generated. They represent potential candidates for expansion, meaning they are not yet fully connected to the graph but are adjacent to it. add its neighbors to the frontier. Randomly or strategically select a node from the frontier to add to the graph. This node becomes part of the graph and its neighbors are added to the frontier. When a frontier node is added to the graph, it is removed from the frontier. Its neighbors that are not already part of the graph are added to the frontier. So wait a minute, I don't understand that. So do you generate the frontier nodes as their own graphs? It sounds like you're supposed to generate frontier nodes that have neighbors as well. And then when you add the frontier node, when you connect the frontier node to the graph, you connect all of its neighbors too? Why would you do that? Why use frontier nodes? Connectivity, because by always connecting a frontier node to the existing graph, you ensure the graph remains connected. Controlled randomness, minimize backtracking. Oh, added. Oh, I see. So I was thinking of frontier nodes as being like a list of just potential nodes, but when you add a frontier node to the graph, the neighbors of that node get added to the frontier. That's the problem. If it's just a list of potential nodes to add, if you've got a bunch of frontier nodes that are not connected to the graph, how do the frontier nodes have neighbors? That's the part that's not making sense to me. Because doesn't that imply that the frontier is already kind of part of the graph? If it has neighbors, like if a frontier node knows what its neighbors are. I don't understand. I don't understand how the frontier node has neighbors when it's not connected to the graph. The tile map is very painful. Yeah, that's true too. Do you recommend Godot? Yeah, I do recommend Godot if you're doing like a small 2D project or a, maybe not necessarily small, but for 2D projects, yeah, for sure. I think another swoosh of the spoon while the items are popping out in the alchemy item would look neat. Ooh, that's a good idea. I should do that. Why is that Godot C# has an AI chat box? This is a Copilot. So this is built into VS Code. It's not specific to Godot C#. Yeah, that's right. I'm sure my programming search history implies I'm a first-year comp sci student. Right, yeah. The difference between a first-year comp sci student and a senior engineer is the ability to actually like narrow down what you don't understand about a solution, I think. Because like all this makes sense. Like this is all graph theory stuff. I get that. But there's just like one bit in here, which is about the frontier nodes having neighbors that I don't understand. So we'll see. Used Copilot's agent mode the other day and it took me to a dark place. Who knew the bot trained on my terrible CSS on GitHub would be bad at CSS? Right, true. Have you ever heard of the book C# Player Guide? Would you recommend it? I have not. I'm not actually big into programming books. I know a lot of people are, but I don't read books. I'm sorry. I don't read books. So I wish I could recommend it, but I don't know anything about it. Hello, Kinyaz. Welcome, welcome. David, let's see. In Prims, it's the edges that are part of the frontier, if I remember correctly. Should go to bed now. It's 1:30 a.m. Good luck with the map gen. Thank you, Carto. I appreciate that. So the edges are part of the frontier. The thing that's confusing me is they're saying that the frontier nodes are not connected to the graph. And if they're not connected to the graph, then they don't have edges and they don't have neighbors, right? I'm sure I'm misunderstanding something, but frontier node may not yet be connected to the graph, but it's considered to have potential neighbors based on the rules or constraints of the graph generation process. These neighbors are nodes that could be connected to the frontier node if it were added to the graph. Let me explain the concept in more detail. A frontier node is a candidate for being added to the graph. Its neighbors are determined by the rules of the graph generation algorithm. Okay. Frontier node is not yet part of the graph, so its neighbors are not connected to it. However, once the frontier node is added to the graph, connections can be established between it and its neighbors. Oh, so the neighbors are things that are already on the graph. So the neighbors are not other frontier nodes. The neighbors are nodes that are already in the graph. What? This is the part that I'm getting confused on too. A frontier node is a candidate for being added to the graph. Okay, that's what a frontier node is. It's a candidate for being added to the graph. But then here it says, when a frontier node is selected, the algorithm discovers its neighbors, and then these discovered neighbors are then added to the frontier. It seems like the word frontier is being used in two different ways here. That a frontier node can be a node that is not yet in the graph, but is a candidate for being added to the graph. But the frontier, generally speaking, is the nodes that are at the edges of the graph that are like being added to or built out from. If that's the case, then like shouldn't this just be called like a candidate node and the frontier is just like the outer reaches of the graph? Imagine you are generating a map on a 5x5 grid. Each cell is a potential node, and nodes can connect to their adjacent cells. Okay. Start with the top left cell as part of the graph. Its neighbors are 0, 1, and 1, 0, which are added to the frontier. Oh, okay, yeah, so those are right, okay. Suppose 0, 1 is selected as the next frontier node. Its neighbors are that. Since 0, 0 is already part of the graph, only 0, 2... Oh, so this is already, wait a minute. This is assuming that the nodes already have positions. Or that, imagine you're generating a map on a 5x5 grid. So this already has some notion of what all of the potential connections are. That's not how I was thinking about my solution. My solution is you start with a node in the middle and then you build outward from there. I suppose what I could do is I could create like see, that doesn't make any sense because this, we know how many nodes there are in the graph or potential nodes. There's 25 in a 5x5 grid. But for me, I may want to generate like 15 to 20 or something, or 20 to 30. I don't understand what a frontier is, I guess. Frontier nodes are placeholders for potential expansion. So what? Are they placeholders? Are they candidates? Are they actually part of the graph? Is the AI just like leading me astray here? It's like using the word frontier in like 4 different ways here. Frontier nodes are placeholders for potential expansion. Their neighbors are determined based on the graph structure and rules. Once a frontier node is added to the graph, its neighbors can be connected and the process continues. What if I don't necessarily create a blank graph and then replace the blank encounters from a table, adjusting weights based on what you have so far. Yeah, so it seems like that's what I'd have to do for this solution. It seems like I'd have to generate like a list of 20 like placeholder nodes, and then based on some kind of algorithm determine like as they're being placed what they are. But then I don't really see the benefit of also, what is a neighbor on a graph like this? Maybe that's confusing too. Because this is kind of like this is not really structured, right? Like this could be a neighbor of that, but it's not, right? It's only a neighbor of these things, right? Because the neighbor is determined based on the edges, right? So this could be a neighbor here, it could be a neighbor here, it could be a neighbor of this one. I think that's part of the confusion too, is like I don't really have... The neighbors are kind of ambiguous in this case. If I just took this, oops, get out of here. Stop it. Let's see if this works. I'm trying to generate a map from a graph, kind of like shown in the attached image. Neighbors in this case are somewhat ambiguous and random. Is the frontier method still suitable for this? Nerdy stuff, yeah, true. Why you C# instead of GDScript? I would recommend you check out the FAQs that are linked in the description below. Chandra, welcome to the stream. I mean, it's AI, it might just be some jumbo. That sounds correct. That's probably true. I might have to go to a real source. The whole frontier thing sounds like you generate a few potential additions to the graph, and then on some criteria you choose an option. Yeah, that's true, but then it's like... Yeah, I don't know. I think the other is essentially creating a connected subgraph of an existing connected graph based on some rule, but you would still need some parent graph which has all the possible connections defined. I see. Instead of strict adjacency, define neighbors based on proximity or random selection. Okay, so that makes sense. Probably be both, because like in this case... Okay, so here's what I'd probably do. This is the way I'm thinking about doing it to some extent. So it sounds like I need to have some kind of positional data with the nodes in order to get this neighbor stuff to work. So what I'd probably do is I'd start with the center here, and then I'd choose like a radius. So I'll have like rings, let's say. So I'd have like a ring like this, ring like that, so on and so forth. But within the ring here, it could be a random radius of like 32 to 64, and as well as a random angle. And so I could choose maybe, you know, a certain amount of nodes to put in that ring. So like here, 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 and there maybe. That's probably too far away, but you know what I mean? Something like that. So that could be like my ring here. And then I could have like a second one that's, I'll use a different color. You know, like this, that. And obviously I need to put more out on the other rings. Maybe that would make the neighbor connections a little bit easier. Because now I can do stuff like this. I could add random connections. And the ring will sort of be able to determine, you know, sort of be able to determine how difficult the encounter is. But it should be also easier to define neighbors too, because the neighbors of this node could be, so the neighbors of this node here could be this one, this one, this one, or this one, right? So I could use proximity, or maybe just angles too. I could maybe use angles. So I could say, well, in this first ring here, the neighbors of this node are the nodes where the direction from the start is sort of aligned with the direction from the start to this, right? So those could be neighbors there, so that any of these neighbors that are going upward, those are not valid neighbors. And then I could actually potentially do the same thing. Maybe I could just use that for this too, where I take the direction from here to here and here to here, and take the dot product and see if those are pointing sort of like in the same direction. Because that solution would avoid situations where this node gets connected all the way up here, which would not be good. Nodes don't need to follow strict spatial strict spatial structure. Instead, place nodes randomly within a defined area. Yeah, so I think that's basically what I was just talking about, where I have rings. So like the first batch of nodes is generated within a random radius from the start, and then the second ring of nodes is also a random radius from the start, but the minimum random is greater than the maximum random of the first ring, so that they spread out. And then controlling path complexity, ensure that each node has at least one connection leading closer to the end or goal. There is no goal. Start with a single node. Add frontier nodes randomly, generate new nodes, and add them to the frontier. For each new frontier node, determine its potential neighbors. Okay, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, I would generate the random frontier nodes in the ring, and then determine its neighbors, connect those neighbors somewhat randomly, and then repeat until complete. Okay, I think I have a better understanding of this now. What was getting me confused was the neighbor thing with a sort of like a amorphous kind of grid, or a amorphous map layout here. Wait, this whole development thing is just math with extra steps? It definitely can be. You could create your graph of nodes with neighbor relationships, then you can just shift the locations visually. Can I do that? So just generate them in a pure data structure kind of way without position data, and then just generate the positions like just purely visually. Do I need an actual position for proximity though? Because if I'm going to determine the neighbors based on, I guess, let me think, how would this look in a pure data way without... Yeah, I guess that's true. I could generate the neighbors first. Generate neighbors of this node, generate neighbors of this node, generate neighbors of this node. And then I can just place them visually based on the neighbors and stuff. I should have become an architect like my mom wanted to. That's funny. How many code review requests have you gotten? Quite a few. I think I have like 15 or so. The next code review video will be out probably this weekend on Saturday. Oh, I should have read this. Your map looks nothing like how I thought. Just thinking Slay the Spire style map. Yeah, Slay the Spire style map is very easy because it's just hierarchical, right? So it's just, you've got your starting point, and then you've got like a tier 1 with multiple choices and a tier 2 with multiple choices, and there's some like connection between the different choices, but you're all going the same direction, right? My map is going to have like loops and potential backtracking, not necessary backtracking, but the player could backtrack if they wanted to. So it's not just going in a random, or it's not just going in a constant direction. It's kind of amorphous, right? I think it's going to be easier to reason about if I just generate the locations for the graph first and then use that to determine the neighbors, rather than trying to work from a pure data structure and then map those to positions later. I'm sure I can make it work that way, but for me, it's just going to be easier to understand if I just generate the nodes with positional data from the get-go, I think. Probably do some topology to turn a nice graph you generate into something that looks more random. But I have no idea how easy or hard that would be. I'm hoping that just by generating these at random locations within a certain radius, and then also adding like little art. So you could imagine like this being a little road right here, right? And then maybe this one has like gravestones littering it, right? And this one can have like a wagon wheel or something, or like a wagon. So I think by adding those little visual flares, having icons for each of the nodes, and like making these look like roads and having trees and stuff, I think that that's going to make it look map-ish enough. You still could, Anthony, you just need to know which generation cycle so you know how to put them. Yeah. Definitely coming out Thursday. You can create them without a spatial structure. There are some cool graph visualization algorithms that will space it out for you, but getting spacing that's consistently visually appealing can be a bit tricky. No silver bullet, no wrong way to do it, just sometimes more optimal. That's true. Do you really need that like that? What do you mean? I don't know what you're referring to by that. Hello, Whiteman. What you doing looks good, but I'm not into it, so I'm interested. Yeah, so I'm basically trying to, so for the people who weren't here, in this game that I'm making here, which is a collectible card game, auto battler roguelike with necromancer, alchemy, medieval science themes. It's an auto battler, so you arrange your grid like this and you fight combat encounters that are just automatic after you arrange your grid. So it's like Backpack Hero or Backpack Battles or whatever it's called. But the problem I was having with this event system is that it's very rigid. So each of these little notches up here is a event, and then the sword is a combat. And so there's not really a whole lot of variability here. You do 2 events and then a combat, and then 2 events and then a combat, and so on and so forth. And the other problem is that you're just kind of like given 3 random choices and you just make the best choice that you can. But if I do a map, which is what I'm kind of like brainstorming right now, I think that number 1, it's more visually appealing. Number 2, it adds more variety to the gameplay experience because you could encounter multiple combat encounters back to back, or you could encounter multiple of the same, like you could do alchemy back to back, for instance, or you could do health increase back to back. So it adds a lot more variety to the gameplay, but also I think it gives the player a better opportunity to plan out their build so they can say like, ooh, yeah, my build is going to be really good if I can hit this alchemy and this health increase and then fight this enemy up here and then grab this artifact. It just gives a player a lot more agency during the gameplay. At least that's the thought. And I think that that's one big thing that's missing from my game right now is like player agency in terms of the combat or the encounters that you have, because right now it feels like a very on-rails experience where you just go through the events that the game throws at you and try to create the best thing you can, which I think is fine. Like, I think I could make that work, but I don't think it can hurt to give the player more choice here. So that's what I'm experimenting with. If you do it as a data structure first, and then you can do something interesting like modeling the connections as springs, there'll be some equilibrium that you can solve for. That is interesting, so that everything spaces nicely. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I'm gonna have to play around with that. Almost look like constellations. Yeah, kind of. I mean, it won't look like that in the final game, I don't think. Because like for the roads, I would make them a little bit curved, you know. Perfecting that elevator pitch, I see. Yeah, I still gotta work on the elevator pitch a little bit. Faster than Light's beacon map looks semi-similar to the style you're going for, even if the progression is still left to right. Okay, I will take a look at that, thank you. Some of the BS in game design, your intuition is correct with the map and it providing agency. Well, good, I'm glad I'm on the right track. And it's good to have you here, Joshua, thank you for your input. It's a good sign when you explain it and I'm thinking about how I might do it. Yeah. I think, yeah, when I first introduced this, you know, like an hour ago, I'm always happy when people's brains start going, they're like, oh, you could do this and you could do that and you could have this happen. It's like, I think that's generally a good sign when people like get excited about the idea and start thinking their own ways of doing it. So yeah. Going off that, I assume there are known algorithms that can do something like that already. Yes, I was just throwing out an idea, a math student and someone teaching myself game dev. I think it would work for sure. I think your idea would work, absolutely. Hello, Sanzo. Good morning to you as well. Hello, fat man. I have a random idea about the game. What if you can make every item you can use bigger and its effect increase, or make it smaller and its effect decrease? I mean, that's an interesting idea for sure. The problem with that is I'd have to redraw the art for every card that could be made bigger or smaller. Now, one way I could accomplish that is just have a variant. So like a giant skeleton warrior, which is a separate card entirely, but maybe there could be an upgrade path from the skeleton to a giant skeleton. But yeah, just making each card like shrinkable or growable, it would not work with the style of the game as it exists currently. Ideas that generate ideas means it's good. I think so. I think it's a good sign. Do you have to hand design each map? No, the idea is that the maps will be randomly generated. There will be icons for all of the encounters, and then for these connections here, I would just have various props and stuff. So like I could have a road texture that's just, you know, tiled or whatever along this line, and then I could dot along the road. I could dot like trees or gravestones or wagons, like I was saying. You know, like if this was a sea map, I'd put like serpents here, sea serpents. But so I won't have to hand design the map. The map will be randomly generated, but then like little decorations will be placed on the map to give it a more like, yeah, just a better feel. I don't want it to look like a constellation. I want it to look like an organic like map of the village or whatever, you know what I mean? The spring idea is exactly how most graph viz algorithms work. It's just easy to run into situations where your graph gets jumbled and your algorithm won't be able to untwist it. That's the thing that I'm worried about. And that's the thing that I was kind of thinking of, is because like it's much easier for me to reason about this if I give the nodes positional data to begin with, and then if I want to determine what are the nodes of this node right here, well, I can say, well, obviously these ones aren't neighbors, right? Because of their positional data, especially with relationship to the center, means that they're on the other side of the map, right? But if I've got a flattened like sort of data structure with no positional data, I may end up connecting this node to a bunch of neighbors that ultimately don't make sense, especially when they're connected to neighbors themselves, right? So it may be the case that the spring, like you said, gets jumbled rather than creating a nice, like outwardly sprawling system. Now, I'm sure I'm wrong about that. I'm sure there's a way to solve that problem. But to me, it's easier to start with the positional data and then take that positional data into account when I'm choosing which node neighbors are connected to each other, if that makes sense. To me, that's just going to be easier to reason about. But I understand with like most graph visualization like software, especially if you want to support like arbitrary graphs, like there's not going to be positional data. But because this is a game, I'm going to be able to generate positional data ahead of time for my graph that I can then use for visualization purposes, right? I'm not sure it'll work for you, but have you seen how artists use Rise for drawing maps. You can randomly scatter the rise and line it. What is that? Rise for drawing maps? I'm not sure if I know what rise is. Alien Hominid Invasions map progression has you see the whole map, being able to move to cells left, right, and up. You'll have to go up to get permanent upgrades, but planning ideal paths is fun. I'm gonna have to check that out too. I've got a lot of things to look up after this. You want the player to have a consistent experience, it's probably better to start from coordinates. I think so. I mean, that's my hunch too, but we will see. We'll see. What happened to... I don't know. I don't know anything about that. D Pistolero. I don't know anything about that. Multiplayer course on Godot, please. Yes, I'm working on that right now. So, I actually have a bunch of lessons recorded and rendered already. And so yeah, I'm spending basically my off-stream time working on that. The goal was to have that done by the end of the month, but it's taking quite a while. So maybe June is when it will be available. With you 100%, cool. Do the paths cross with each other? So the idea is no, like I don't want like this road to cross over here, which now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if I have a good way of doing that. There's like a Veroni algorithm. I don't remember exactly what it's called. I think it's called Veroni. I may be able to use that to make sure that paths don't cross. Yeah, I think I can use that. So there's an algorithm I can use to make sure that paths won't cross each other. I think it's a Veroni diagram or something. Basically what that will do is that will just generate what I've drawn here, where basically there's a bunch of triangles or quadrilaterals or whatever, and none of the edges intersect each other. My graphs suck. Did you fail your exam, Kineas? What's with the vitriol today? Potentially cool idea. You could have the connections have random small buffs or debuffs for going along them to create more variety, like small changes to max HP or something similar. Have the connections have random small debuffs or buffs for going along them to create more variety, like small changes to max HP or something similar. Yeah, that's a cool idea. So many good ideas. So many good ideas. I should probably focus on getting the map actually functional first. There are a couple of things that you're going to bump into. Can the player revisit a node? The answer is yes to that question. If yes, you got to keep it fresh. Yeah, so I think I want the graph to be such that you can plan out your entire path without backtracking at all, which means that there's going to need to be plenty of like loops and connections, right? So the player should be able to go here, 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 you know what I mean? Like, but let's say that there's an encounter, like let's say there's another node right here, but you really don't want to do this encounter because for whatever reason. So I want to allow the player to go back this way and then up here, you know what I mean? Now, in terms of keeping it fresh, maybe there is opportunity here to make something happen when you backtrack on a node, but I don't know what that would be. Ideally, like the penalty for backtracking would be, because again, you only have like 10 moves. You only have like 10 moves. So after you do 10 moves, you automatically get thrown into the boss fight. So there's still like, there's a movement budget that you have. And so if you were to backtrack, you would avoid a bad encounter, like an encounter that you want to avoid. But the penalty is that you've basically just wasted a move that could have been used optimally elsewhere, right? So I think that's the way I'm thinking about it anyway. It still might feel bad to backtrack, and it's especially going to feel bad to backtrack if you have no other choice. Like I don't want this to actually be a possibility here where this node is just by itself and there's no connections, because that means that you have to backtrack. So the cost of going to this node is actually 2 movements, right? So I don't want that to happen. Rice. Oh, rice. Oh, interesting. Artists use rice for... Okay, I got you. What am I working on right now? I'm working on a map traversal system for my roguelike game. Welcome, Jet. Good to see you. Your initial angle solution should prevent that because the nodes in the same ring are aware of each other. Gotcha. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll try that. Voronoi. Voronoi. Okay, it's not Voroni. Voronoi. Do you do everything with tweens? Or do you animate in A-Sprite too? I mostly just use tweens in the animation player, yeah. Just negging, I appreciate your graphs. Thank you, Kenny S. It's all right, yeah. Adam is right, you need two sides to every coin. But, okay, jot all ideas now, they might be really useful, yeah. Probably not let the player backtrack to the path they have crossed. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Alex Sir Weaver, how is it going? It's going well, how are you doing? All right, well, I've got a lot to think about here and a lot to prototype with. But yeah, I think probably tomorrow, if I don't do any work on this today, we'll probably be doing this map work tomorrow. So if you want to see how that goes, then definitely tune in. Let's see. The ability to visit every node without backtracking means that there is an Euler trail on the graph, which requires every node to have an even number of edges connected to it, except for the start and end. Interesting. But is that assuming that you want to traverse all of the nodes in the graph? Right? Because in this case, there could be 20 edges, but you can only move 10 times, right? So it's possible that even though it's technically not possible to visit every node without backtracking, it will be possible that within 10 moves you can visit nodes without backtracking, right? Have you ever used vector graphics? I have not, no. I have not. Well, if you only use each edge once, that might still mean revisiting old nodes. That's traversing every edge. Gotcha, okay. That makes sense. Cool, well, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you all for watching, very much appreciate it. And yeah, I think this is a very exciting new thing. So yeah, I'm gonna get started on that. If not today, then tomorrow on stream. So hit the notification bell to be notified when I go live. It will be at 10 a.m. Eastern. I hope to see you all there. Thank you all for your support. Thank you all for watching. Again, check out the links in the description below. Those are all the ways you can support me. And I very much appreciate all the support. And if you don't want to or can't financially support, that's totally fine. I would ask then instead that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, watch my other videos. It's all great. Again, the next code review video will be out on Saturday. I think it'll be a good one. And yeah, hope you enjoy it. Traversing all the nodes in the graph would be a Hamiltonian path. We have so many smart people in this chat, goodness. You guys are making me feel dumb. All right, anyway, I'm kidding. But thank you again, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. All right, bye-bye.